back here at the Hall of History, the second unit, as the case may be, and we're looking at our continuing study on immigration. And in this particular episode, Welcome to America. Uncle Sam's not here, but Uncle Sam didn't really come along till a little bit after this time. So, but it does say what a lot of immigrants came to the United States for. To dream big. They had dreams of a better land and better time for themselves, make their fame and fortune, and most of them wanted to work very hard to get there. Well, once the immigrants reached America, and they went through, if they're from Europe and England, they went through Ellis Island. If they were from Asia, Japan, China primarily, they went through Angel Island out in California, San Francisco. Was really the culture shock. We're going to look at some different film clips in the next few days of this culture shock. You know, these were people from Europe. The old ways in Europe and in America was a big, muscular, booming towns on the East Coast. America was thought as the land of opportunity, and we're really anything goes. And many of these people came over. They did not have families. They had very little money. They didn't speak the language, and it was definitely a culture shock. And quite often when they came over, they were always taken advantage of. And it still happens somewhat today. Ethnic communities sprang up in every major city. Little Italy, Chinatown, if you've ever been to Chicago, those areas are there. In New York, Boston, all the major cities. It's kind of interesting in Grand Rapids here. You get on the west side of Grand Rapids, you had the Polish and the Dutch and the Germans and Lithuanians, and many of these places started their own social societies or clubs. I know for the Polish, it was the Fifth Street Hall over on the west side. For the Lithuanians, it was the Kadavies or the Vytautas Aid Society. And these were places where the people could meet, socialize, and be around the culture that they left from home. Oh, I guess we'll get this out of here. How did the ethnic communities help immigrants? Well, you know, as you could probably think of, you know, similar language, customs, ideas, dress. And, you know, people from these immigrating countries would naturally migrate to these areas. Well, what started to happen, though, is that they start to really set themselves apart from mainstream America. I can remember my grandmother spoke Polish and Lithuanian, but in the house when my dad was growing up, they could only speak English. They wanted to be Americanized, adopt the ways, the language, and the culture of America. And it really depended on what community you were from. But many on the west side of Grand Rapids definitely wanted to be Americanized. At this time, you started this whole idea of hyphenated Americans. You know, the Irish, African American, Chinese American. And you start looking at this, and what ended up happening is you started all this hyphenated stuff led a lot of people, the nativists, to really, they did not like this ethnic or these new immigrants coming in. They felt they were un-American, and so that definitely led to some problems. Nativism, which we just introduced, the immigrants must be of the right kind and the right place. You know, it's always interesting. Unless you're a Native American, everybody was an immigrant to this country. But you know, the people that were here, you know, when the United States was founded, were predominantly Western European and British, spoke English, and they thought they pretty much ruled the roost. And so they really looked for people that were very, very similar to them. We've already talked about the British and the German, the Scandinavians, Norway, Sweden, Finland, in that area. They always thought that these people were from these areas were hardworking, upstanding, had the right religion, predominantly Protestant, and were welcomed into America. The other ethnic groups, especially those from Eastern Europe, which were quite often Catholic, were not welcomed as easily. Catholics worship the Pope. That goes back to England with the Papists, Henry VIII, and the foundation of the Anglican Church. And there was a lot of talk. People did not like the Jews. As you can see here, they were untrustworthy, and this stereotype forced a lot of these ethnic groups into their own small communities. The New York Marathon took place, and it runs through a lot of these ethnic communities as the course winds its way through all the boroughs of New York City. Well, how did they distinguish? Well, there were the old immigrants from Western Europe. And as we mentioned, they were typically clean, thought to be clean, smart, hardworking, Protestant. That good old Protestant work ethic was definitely valued at this time. The new immigrants from Eastern Europe, Southern Europe were thought of as being lazy. They didn't speak English, so they were thought of being stupid. And especially if you were a Catholic or Jewish, you were not highly thought of at the time. If you were from Asia, you definitely were thought of as an atheist. You didn't believe in a God that the people from Western Europe beforehand had any familiarity with, and so these people were not very welcomed either. Most of the Asian people, as you would guess, would stay and wind up on the West Coast, but they did migrate across the country. Well, what you started having was really this difference between what was called the melting pot and the salad bowl. The melting pot, all these races and cultures, you mixed together in the United States, and you became Americanized. People became Americanized. They pretty much gave up their own culture, learned to speak English, and adopted the ways of what people would call the American culture, which, if you start thinking about it, is kind of hard to define, really, other outside than really speaking English and being hardworking. And typically make sure you were not Catholic at the time. The salad bowl philosophy is you just mix them all together. And like a salad, if you went through a salad, you could pick out the lettuce and the tomatoes and the cucumbers and everything else that's in there. So all these cultures are together, but they really don't blend or mix into one homogeneous group. Homogeneous meaning the same throughout. It was more of this idea of being heterogeneous or not the same throughout. So it's an interesting philosophy, which is still being debated today. And we're going to do this cartoon. We will do this one in class, and so that will end our talk for today.